All right, it says I'm live. Good morning, good morning. I am Toni from the Fiberology Lab, and this is the coffee chat with me. Pretty creative name. I'm working on it. Actually, I'm going to adjust the name next week as we start coming out of this series. So I come in for a few, well, most mornings and talk a little bit about some quilting basics over the last couple months. I have been working with redoing my Learn to Quilt class. I'm doing it virtually, so this is kind of my launching point to get prepared and make sure I'm giving you the right information. So, good morning, Miss Jody. Good to see you this morning. Very good to see you. So, I really appreciate your time, and especially on the replays. Thank you so much on the replayers for commenting. I do go back and I do comment back, and I do appreciate that. But if you're live, that's awesome too, because you get to interact and ask questions, and I get to answer questions. It's kind of fun too. So, I'm going to wait for a minute or two for all the algorithms to work properly so everyone gets the notifications. But today we're going to talk about binding. Hopefully you can hear me. Can everybody hear me? Hey there, Christine. Hey, Hope. Because I have two cameras set up today, and because they're so close to each other, I get a lot of feedback. So I'm hoping it doesn't sound bad, because if I try to listen to it, it's going to sound really bad. Hey there, Miss Connie. Good morning to you. So do we have sound? Is everybody hearing me okay? I'm going to wait a second to see what the response is on that. Because I have a feeling, oh, yes. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I wasn't sure. I've done this a couple times where there's been no sound. I've been talking for 10 minutes and there's no sound. So I'm glad that you guys had sound. Whew. It's always a struggle. So always exciting to go on. So, hey, Anna, good morning to you. Good to see you this morning as well. So let me just touch base with a couple things that's happening here in the lab. We have Stitched Up Stories. Lisa Archer is our guest speaker this weekend at 4 p.m. on Sunday, Eastern Time Zone. Stitched Up Stories is a way for you to connect with the designer, kind of understand their processes, get to know them a little better, and realize, hey, they are real people too. You know, these designers they work hard, they have families to support, and they are very creative, and they have different ways of doing their creativity. And Lisa Archer is an awesome person. She does pickle pie designs. So if you have an embroidery machine, I highly encourage you to sign up and watch her. She also is a Bernina ambassador, so she knows a lot about Bernina machines, sewing machines. So you can sign up at Stitched Up Stories. Let me put my little happy banners up here. Stitched Up Stories. It's $20 to register for an hour of time of engaging with her, and then also you get a replay video link so you can watch it. If you couldn't make it Sunday evening, you can always watch it later on in the week for 7 days. And there's normally giveaways and other fun things, which is kind of cool. And if you're like, well, I still don't know what Pickle Pie Designs is, that's her website if you want to go check it out. I just went there and I'm like, oh, it's so cute. She has so many cute things. What I love a lot about her designs, that she does embroidery in the hoop. She does projects in the hoop. So you follow the prompts and the steps on how to do the embroidery, and when you pull it out of the hoop, it's a purse, it's a bag, it's something. Placemat. She has in the hoop placemats. Simple, quick. Well, not necessarily always quick with embroidery, but you can always get a project and a gift done over a weekend and be able to get those taken care of. But go to stitchedupstories.com and register, and then just make sure you use us as a sponsor shop so we get some kickback on that. Hello, Miss Susan. Good to see you this morning. I'm glad you can hear me. I'm just making sure there's not a lot of feedback, because with the two microphones, even though my computer is off, I get feedback, so I'm glad you guys aren't hearing that. And I have a microphone. You can't see it. It's hidden under my shirt. You know, let's get personal, girls. There's a bra. It's wonderful, and I'm clipping on microphones because you can't see it. So there, I told my little secret for the day. So Stitch Up Stories this Sunday at 4 p.m. Eastern. The other thing we have coming up, I haven't talked a lot about it because I've been trying to, I forget, to be honest with you. And we're getting up the final details. So at the end of this month, we are hosting Becky and Tracy from Sew and Stitches out of Pocatello, Idaho, for a very unique retreat weekend. They're coming from January 27th through, I think it's January 28th or 29th. It's a 4-day weekend. I don't have the dates in front of me. But we still have some spots available. And what I did for the spots is go ahead and bring it back down to our pre-sale price of $6.99 for the weekend. That includes your instruction, it includes meals. It does not include your lodging, and it does not include your supplies. But we have options for you to get your tools. They teach the Deb Tucker tools, the Studio 180 tools, and they're really kind of cool. But we also want to make sure you understand this is a retreat. We're going to have lots of fun. There's going to be games. There's a meet and greet. We're going to actually hang out at the local quilt shop here in Palm Coast one night and just have a great way to do community. So we do have spots available. If you're interested, you can go to that link that is below me right now. Christine's coming. Jody's coming. I'm so excited to have my friends from far away come to get to meet them in person. I'm really excited to meet several of you who are coming already. Hey there, Tris. Good morning to you. Good to see you. I can hear you. Oops, I have to read them. And you are going on a shop hop with my friend. You're right, Tris. I am. Aurora talks. She narked on me. So yes, Tris, I'm going shop hopping this week, and I haven't done a shop hop in a long time. Personally, no one in a long time. So, but if you have, thank you, Jody. I appreciate the dates are 27th through the 30th. Jody's going to hang out a little bit longer. She's also going to be part of my Tulip Club that next weekend. So, if you guys want to join us, the link is below us. So please join us. We have plenty of space, and it'll be lots and lots of fun. So for today, let's talk a little bit about binding. It's pretty funny, as I've been learning to quilt for almost 15 years now. There's 3 things that are the hardest pieces in a new beginner's mind. The first one is cutting, second one's picking out fabric, and the last one is doing the binding. And again, I kind of put a disclaimer every time I say this. There's 20 different ways to do everything in quilting. I am showing you what works best for me, but that doesn't mean it will work best for you. So try it out and then ponder it and make it sink in a little bit. Now, one of the things that I have done with binding, because how many bindings do you truly do in a month if you're a quilter? Not many, maybe one, maybe a couple, or you wait 6 months and do 10 in 1 month. So we tend to forget as we get to the next step of binding. So I have created a video all about how I do binding, step by step, and it's by machine because I like to do by machine. But I'm going to show some hand tips here in a second. But you can see that video. It's free for you to view. It is in our Mighty Networks under friendsfibersfunds.club. Oops, I hit the wrong button. Let me find that up there. There it is. It's free to join. You can join our CEO club while you're there. In the groups, there's a group called Technical Workshops, and in there you're going to find a couple of different things. You're going to find our learning. Sissy did that video last year. I don't know if the paper piecing one's in there. I have a paper piecing one, and I have the binding one, which are all valuable tools for you to remember how to do binding as you are doing them once a month or every other month. It's not quite like riding a bicycle. Until you've got like 20 under your belt, it really kind of takes a little bit of time. I've had people videotape me at least 3 or 4 times every time I do binding in the shop because they always forget, or they forget where they put the video. It cracks me up. So hey there, Miss Pat from Oklahoma. Thank you for joining this morning. Good, Christine. I'm not alone. Okay. Not that I'm trying to beat you at doing more than 10 in a month, because binding is like my least favorite thing. But at the same time, once you do it, you're done. You're done. But I am going to talk a couple more sessions about how to do a label, how to do hanging sleeves, and what was the other one? I thought I had something else. Oh, how to care and wash your quilt. Now, one of the steps I did forget to mention between our quilting to our binding is how to square up the quilt. I'll talk about that tomorrow because I don't have a sample presented that I can show you to do that. So I've got binding samples because this is something I teach a lot in the shop, but I didn't have how to square up your quilt before you put your binding on. So if you are following along with the videos and doing your little quilt, wait until I show you that and talk about that tomorrow, about how to square up your sandwich before you put the binding on. All right. So I am, like I said, go to our Mighty Networks. You'll see that video and step by step and how I do binding and how I cut it. I do typically cut mine at 2.5. I used to do 2.25, but because of my new Janome, I use a different foot for it. And so I do cut mine at 2.5 now. So I have a little wider binding. Excuse me. You must use your walking foot when you're applying your binding. Always put your binding on with a walking foot. So you're going to put your binding on your quilt before you either finish it by machine or by hand. And if you are finishing it by hand, you're going to attach your binding to the and bring the binding over and stitch it on the back side by hand. Now, if you're doing it by machine, I do it the opposite way. I put it on the back and I bring it to the front. That way I can see my binding on the front and make sure I catch it. I don't care. Is that the right thing to say? I don't worry about my seam line on the back of my quilt because it's the back of my quilt. If you are one of those people that want to have it in the stitch in the ditch, if practice will make perfect, you can do it. It's just a little more challenging. So thanks, Christine. I agree. 2.5 is great. I used to do 2.25, but I do 2.5 now. If I'm doing placemats or table runner, I actually bring it down to 2 inches because I really like a really fine binding. I should have pulled that I have another sample out with a really fine binding to make it thinner, because when you have a smaller project, you don't want a big thick binding because it might distract from that smaller project. So I do bring it down to 2 inches when I'm doing. If you're doing by Annie projects and she talks about binding in there, she does it at 2.25. This is not the same. So we're talking about binding a quilt. Her binding is a little different. It's a bias binding. I'm not going to talk about bias binding because I just want you to be successful and finish your project. So let me flip over to my my desktop or my workstation and show you some things I have with hand binding. So just like I was saying, and again, all this information will be in that video, that free video that I have in our Mighty Networks, how you attach your binding to your quilt. So on this, I've already attached it. I'm just going to confuse you. This one I've already attached. This is one of my sample ones. This is what I used to use in the store. As you can see, it's kind of well loved. But you're going to sew it onto the front if you're doing it by hand, just like this. That is a 1/4 inch seam allowance. So and this is a 2 inch. Make sure that's a 2 inch. Yeah, this is a 2 inch binding. So this binding is like almost 1/8 of an inch. That's between 1/4 and 1/8 of an inch when I bring it over. So when you sew, you put that raw edge of your binding, which you've created. Again, follow that video and then stitch it down. And then miter corners, everything of that is on the video. I don't want to repeat that. The whole goal I was going to show you today was to show you how to hand stitch it. Because in the video, I show you how to machine stitch it, but I don't talk about hand stitching. And normally I will hand stitch stuff if it's small, like a table runner, 45-inch square or smaller, because it's relaxing. If you like hand work, if you're a person who likes to work with their hands, this is a great way to relax in the evening while you're watching TV. Now you see I have put binder clips on this. This little Singer can is my binding toolbox. It's kind of scary and dingy. It's a little old. I've had it for about 20 years. And in my binding toolbox, I have Thread Heaven, which they don't make anymore, but there's Thread Magic. We have some coming in. And what you're going to do is you run your needle and thread over this product. And I highly encourage you have a conditioner. It's a thread conditioner, which means it just allows that thread and needle to glide easier through all your fabric layers that you're going to be working with. I have Wonder Clips. I do use a thimble. I like my Natural Fit Clover leather thimbles because they fit naturally, and you can see this one's well loved. I have lots of these, and I do have these coming as well. I've got so much coming. I'm so excited. That's for this process. Pair of scissors. I've got some thread and bobbins. What else? I got tweezers in case I have to pull my needle through. Or I don't know why I did that actually. What else is in here? I've got all sorts of seam ripper. So this is just my binding medical kit. So what we're going to do is I have threaded this needle, and I do double-stranded. So, and then I do what they call lovingly the spit knot. At the end of the thread, I wrap it on my finger, and I roll it off and create a knot. Not necessarily always the favorite among people, but that's what I do, and it works fine. I haven't had it come undone yet. So what I have here, I'm going to try to bring this up close to the camera, and hopefully you'll see this. I am left-handed. This is the one thing I cannot teach right-handed. So when I am working with a quilt, I'll actually prefer the weight of the quilt to be away from my body. I don't like it here pulling and weighing me down as I'm trying to hold it in place. So I don't like stitching with the weight of it here and pulling it down and getting in my way. It also makes it really hot. So I always have my quilt pulled away from me. And then I'm just going to pick up, so we've got our line here. You see our stitch line from where we've applied it to the front. What I tend to do, let me put my reading glasses on so I can see and show you. Hopefully you guys can see this under the camera pretty well. Maybe. All right. So that's a guideline. So I'm going to grab a couple strands of fabric. So there's a couple strands of fabric, threads of that fabric. And then at the same time, I'm going to put my needle into the fold of my binding. I'm hoping you guys can see that. Let's stop focusing. There it goes. And then that's how I create my stitch. Now, you totally can whip stitch it. Whip stitches is just grabbing the back and the front and bringing it through. The reason I don't whip stitch is because it shows. I'm not a purist by any forms, but I like to have my threads hiding in that fold of my binding. So I grab the two layers at the same time when I pull the needle. I have been known, well, not have been, I do also do a weave where I just did 2 stitches. I weaved in the back, got the fold, weaved back in the back, and brought to the fold. And then I pull it through. And the reason I use my thimble is because of the bulk. So I'm going through, a fold. I might catch that binding a little bit. My finger is also on the front side of the quilt, so I can feel if the needle hits there. I'll make sure it doesn't come through because you don't want your stitches to pop through the front. You do a ladder stitch? Oh, that's a good one too. Well, shoot, I don't think I'm set up for that. That's a great idea, Hope. I'll do a demonstration on a lot of ladder stitches. But that would work too because that's very decorative because that creates a little cross hatch as you're working through it. So, and then I just come all the way to the miter corner. I'm going to show that here in a second. Let me get a couple stitches in and get to the corner real quick. This is a bigger needle. I tend to use straws. I like straws or milliners, size 9 needles. Because they're thinner, I can catch things and they go pretty fast. I do prefer John James needles because I have a very acidic sweat, oils, whatever you want to call, and so I tend to rust through or corrode through needles really fast. So if I use a John James milliner size 9, it lasts a little longer. It lasts me at least for the whole quilt. Before I used to have to change out needles all the time in quilts. So hopefully you're catching this as I'm doing this. I am doing 1 stitch at a time. I'm trying to be fast and it's sloppy. I don't like that. See how gappy it is? Can you guys see that? I like it really close. I like really small stitches. And again, the whole goal is just to be secured. You do not have to make super close stitches. That's totally up to you. All right, let me get to, so what I'm getting to is the miter. So I've got it clipped already in place. But let me undo that clip so you can kind of see how I created it. What I do is I lay flat the binding on the bottom. And it creates this little wing, this 45-degree wing, because you folded the fabric already on the top when you applied it. That's already there. That's already created. So I'm going to pull that wing out, and then I just bring it back over to make sure it hits that point right there on the inside of that, the inside of the binding. What I do is I'll grab from the back, and I go through both layers. So I'm going through the binding on the bottom and this piece here so it secures it down. I will run a stitch up my binding. I only do 1. I don't worry about too much about tacking it down, but I do 1 stitch. And you can see it kind of hides in there. And I'm going to rotate my project going the other direction. Let me get all that string out of the way. And then bring my needle back through the miter and bring it back down to the back of the fabric, back of the project. I try not to pull. See what I did? I pulled really hard and made it really smoochy. So I'm going to loosen it up so it lays flat. And then I just continue on down this side. And then you have a nice crisp miter point there. And then on the front, it's already mitered as well. So that's just my basics of hand stitching my binding. Like I said, if you check out the video in the Mighty Networks, it has all the details on how I get to that point, and it talks about how I apply it with machine application as well. Because I do a lot of big quilts. I don't have time for the handwork anymore, and I enjoy knitting, so I do that more often. And then, of course, now I'm obsessed with EPP, English paper piecing, that I don't have time for hand binding. So how many of you actually do machine binding or hand? Which one do you prefer? Let me ask that question. Do you prefer machine binding or hand binding? I know a lot of people that are avid hand binders. They would rather hand bind their entire quilt, even if they're giving it away as a gift. Hope I'm gonna have to look up that ladder stitch. I haven't done one on the binding, but I know I've seen people do it. Oops, and I might have to do a demo on that ladder stitch. Machine, Jacqueline says, and so does Christine. Machine on back, hand binding on front. Oh, there you go. You hand bind on the front, Jody. That's interesting. I guess my logic for me, the reason I hand bind on the back is because the front's going to look neat and crisp, and I can make, again, I don't worry what the back looks like too much because it's the back. So that's just me. Jacqueline's like, I dislike handwork. Teach me EPP by machine. Doesn't work, but okay. I understand. I hear a lot of people who don't like handwork. Oh, Jody, you said you mean the opposite. So you do apply it to the front and then you hand stitch it on the back. Okay, that makes more sense. But I do know people that do it the way you originally said. So I wasn't thinking anything different about it because I know people that do that. And same with machine binding. I know a lot of people that apply it to the front and then finish it off on the back, which I've never been comfortable with because you have to make sure you hit that ditch line perfectly for it to be hidden. So that's why I do it the other way around. And Connie says machine because I think it's stronger when my kids wash their clothes often. That's true. Very true, Miss Connie. That's a good point too. If I am doing a quilt that I know it's kind of an heirloom style piece that is going to be used, not rarely used and meant to be a display, I will do it by hand on the back as well because I do want it to have a nicer finished piece look to it. Trish says machine as well. And Christine says unless it's a showpiece, by hand, by machine. What else do we have? Making sure I've got everybody's answer there. I have to share, and if I sound like, oh, well, I can read the comments, Tony. Why are you reading them to me? Because sometimes Facebook, you're not going to see the comments from YouTube and vice versa. So I'm making sure everybody hears and sees the information together. Watch my video in the Mighty Networks. It's really easy again to go to. It's right there on the screen, friendsfibersfun.club. And it's under technique workshop. So you have to ask to join. I know it's weird how it does that. I don't know why it doesn't make that just available to everybody. But then we'll just say, hey, yeah, come on and watch it. And there's a couple other ones. And I will be putting more. I've had a couple. I think Connie was one of them, how to put cornerstones on a border, miter. I'm going to do some technique. That's why I called it technique workshop. I'm going to do some more videos on that, on the basics of how I do things. So I take a step back. I'm not a quilt police. I do teach you fudge space and how to work around things because I don't like ripping out. But I do things in my way, the right way or the wrong way, but it's just another way that might help you do it a different way for yourself, and you might find the process easier or more logical for you. Jan says she does it by hand too. Awesome, Jan. Awesome. So that is our little workshop for today about binding. Tomorrow I'm going to talk a little bit about squaring up the quilt before you put the binding on. I missed a step, but I didn't have I didn't have a prep thing to show you, so I'm going to show you guys that tomorrow. And then we'll talk about labeling and hangers and finishing it up and care of it. So I'll be back tomorrow at 10. And on the same channels, same bat channels, talking about how to square up our quilts before we put our binding on. You'll always find information on all this series right now in our Mighty Networks when I get all the PDFs for each session put up. And they will be up there for a little bit, and then they'll be gone. So just something to think about. If you have, do you square before quilting too? No. And the reason I don't square before quilting is because I have most of my quilts, I would say probably 90% of my quilts, I have a border on them. And when I taught you how to do the borders, part of the process and the way I look at it, my borders help square up my centerpiece. So once my borders are on, my quilt top is square. So no, I do not square. Now, if I don't have a border on and I feel it's inaccurate, then I will debate and assess that situation, Jody. Most of the times, because of all the other processes I do, I don't worry too much about it. But if you are not accurately cutting, accurately pressing, and accurately sewing, and you don't have a border on, you might want to make sure you check your top before you quilt it. You don't want it too skewed to one side or the other. Yeah, Christine, I bet long armors love borders because, like I said, borders help square that centerpiece. Yes, even I have to find a way to square, and that's why I use borders so much. So thanks for that question, Joe. That's a good question. But no, I square down my quilt. And when I square it down, I square it down not what you traditionally will think. Mainly because I don't pre-wash my fabric. So it's not going to be square once I wash it after I finish it all together. So, but I want it to appear square. So that's why I make sure. You're perfect, Jody. Oh, awesome. So you don't need to square down your quilt tops then. You're set. No worries for you. Wonky is a word. Wonky is a word, especially with quilt tops. You don't want to send a wonky quilt top to your long armor because they won't like you. Well, they'll fuss and cuss at your quilt top, just saying. So, all right, guys. That is our lesson for today. I will be back tomorrow at 10 a.m. Eastern, and we'll talk a little bit more about squaring and prepping our quilt before we put the binding on. We're gonna go back a step. We're in two-step. How's that? But don't forget, we got Stitched Up Stories this weekend, and then we got Sew Stitching Fun Retreat at the end of the month. Check both of them out. And if you have any questions, you always email me at info@fiberologylab.com. You guys have a great Wednesday. Happy Hump Day, and I will see you here tomorrow. And tomorrow evening, we also have a live sale too at 8 p.m. Eastern. Remember, we are friends, fibers, and fun.